Okay, thanks everybody for coming. We are going to talk about the OpenAI Agents SDK that came out a few weeks ago, within the last 6 weeks. Pretty excited about this. Not really too sure where this is going, but I really had such great fun doing this over the last, whatever, 2 or 3 weeks trying to put this together. So hopefully I can kind of convince you guys to start trying this, because this is, in my opinion, where a lot of the future is going to be when it comes to, I know you say that every week with LLMs, but I think this is where a lot of the focus is going to be for the next while. Okay, so the agenda for tonight is what are the latest open AI updates, a little bit of news, we'll talk about agents, go through the different, what's the difference between agents and LLMs, talk about their capabilities, the different tools you can use, handoffs, tracing, all that sort of other stuff. Okay, is people joining? Hey, Mike, can you let me know if I mess up again? Because, I'm going to do it at least once this talk. Please. Yeah, because I'll let somebody in and then I can't, I forget where the hell I am. Okay, I have a I've got lots of different examples, but we have one example towards the end, which is a travel agent. And I got the inspiration from that. There was an OpenAI Dev Days talk last year where they created a travel agent with, I think it was Wanderlust is what it was called. I'm trying to just use that for some of the travel that I want to do over the next, couple of months. And then next month, basically, we'll just talk about what we're going to do. We're going to do MCP servers, which is kind of a continuation of what we're doing today. So it's basically, we're going to use some MCP servers to do Airbnb and some other travel stuff. So kind of a nice segue. Okay, so news, a couple of things I noticed, which I hadn't noticed before. There's an OpenAI Academy now. So that looks really cool. I'll show you the screens when we get towards the end. And I go to the resources. Looks like it's got, a bit like the deep learning channels that are out there. Definitely worth looking at. Some really good content. Better than a lot of the cookbooks that they have. They just the information seems more digestible. So if you're starting off from scratch, or if you're looking for some in-depth content for the OpenAI API SDKs, that's a great place to look. And then news from what we're doing for the new memberships. And so still going pretty well. So we have just over 550 members, which is great. And we typically get anywhere from 20 to 30 people each month coming to the talks, and always looking for other people who want to do talks. So if you have an interest in any specific area, so voice agents, like we were talking earlier, Trip, if you want to do a talk on that at any time, if you have enough time, that'd be cool. Anybody else, the only thing I would say is just try to keep whatever selling or spam to the minimum if you do a talk. Next month, we're going to do MCP servers. So that will be coming up pretty quickly, probably in the 3rd week or the 2nd week of next month. So MCP, if you haven't come across it, is the Model Context Protocol. So I've heard it described as the USBs for OpenAI. So what does that mean? Well, basically means if I have, for example, the travel agents that we're doing tonight, if I have an Airbnb feed, what I call an API, I can pretty easily create an MCP server, which will talk in a common protocol to the OpenAI so it can understand what it's working on. And then we can do that to link to lots of different things. So it could be anything from Airbnb to Delta Airlines or whatever else, whatever you can get it to connect to. But basically what we're doing is we're setting up a server which consumes other data and gives it to OpenAI in a format that I can understand. Okay, so why do I think agents are so cool? So let's have a look at, you can tell this was generated with an old version of ChatGPT. So LLMs, what are they? Well, they're conversational only. you're kind of waiting for the LLM is waiting for your input. It's got a really simple memory model, and it's just like a typically one shot or maybe multiple shot, but you're just talking to it and getting a response, and then you're done. Whereas agents are goal-oriented, so you basically say, hey, I want you to do something for me, and they don't just it's not just user to LLM to get a response. It's basically going through this loop to be able to figure out what exactly you need. You give it access to a bunch of tools. So it says, okay, I'm going to try to use these tools to do things. So that could be look up flights. It could be booking a hotel room. It also remembers the context, so it remembers where it is in the conversation. It's autonomous and it can take action. So depending on how much access you give it to the outside world, it can go and spend money for you. So yeah.
We got a little comment from Sean Zhang. Little correction: MCP is invented by Anthropic and later then adopted by OpenAI. That's interesting. Okay. It's usually the opposite, right?
I didn't think it was anything to do with OpenAI. I thought it was kind of third party. So the fact that it was invented by Anthropic is great. So yeah, my bad. I didn't mean to say it was invented by OpenAI. I'm seeing it as just a way to extend OpenAI API calls.
It's usually LangChain is actually the thing that invents everything.
Well, LangChain is, basically that's a framework for, creating complicated LLM calls, just very similar to what we're doing with agents, but not quite in this looping thing. Whereas MCP is basically, I want to connect to an API, so I want to connect to an API that is talking the language that OpenAI or any LLM is going to talk. So yeah, it would make sense that it was not necessarily OpenAI, because OpenAI just adopted it kind of over the last couple of weeks, and then it appeared in Visual Studio Code as part of the Copilot stuff, and it's everywhere now. So I think it's definitely something that we should need to look at pretty quickly to not be left behind. Okay, where was I? But yeah, hey, hit me up if I'm wrong on anything. Honestly, just let me know. I'd like this to be more of a conversation sometimes than just me spouting off. So yeah, put something in the chat. Happy to talk. So one of the examples that I heard was from the Michigan Dev Fest that came recently. So John Thompson was talking about what he thinks agents are. So the example he gave was he used to work for Ernst & Young. He'd go to London all the time. So it was, every 6 weeks he'd have to go for work. So what he wanted his agent to do is to be able to book the flight, because he always flew the same airline, to the same destination. So if it's Heathrow instead of Gatwick, he'd want it to book the hotel, the 2 or 3 hotels that I want to stay at, book a couple of, theater in Shaftesbury Avenue, book a whole bunch of lunch appointments with lots of different people. So you're not going to do that with an LLM, but there's no reason why you can't do it with an agent. So really, that's, for me, I think that's a really good example of what the difference is, what we're trying to do. So in my work, in my day-to-day work, I do a lot of manual busy work. So over the last while, I've been looking to see how we could use agents to kind of multiply my efficiency. So for example, whether that's lead generation, it's the obvious thing to do. Marketing is the obvious thing to do for an agent. Recruiting would be another one, which I would see as being a really cool way to do this. And you can do some of this with LLMs, but you can't do all of it without using agents. And so in a nutshell, agents extend the reach of LLMs by allowing you to use different tools, which gives you access to the outside world. That's been around for a while with assistants, but it also has this ability to take action for you. So let's get that into a little bit more. So I think, yeah, in one way I see agents as being kind of a natural progression of what assistants have been, and maybe even a bit of custom GPTs in there as well. Okay, so this is the usual flow for user interacting with the LLM when they ask a question. So user asks a question, the LLM gets a response. And then, but in the agent world, what if the LLM can't answer that question? Maybe it's something that's, a relatively new piece of information that the LLM wasn't trained on, or it might want to reach out to an API to, The classic thing being, tell me what the weather is going to be tomorrow. Obviously, an LLM can't tell you that because it's not trained on the data. So it will move over to its tools and tasks. This is where the agent goes to work. And there's lots of different things. You can do a web search, you can do a file search, you can do a computer use, so it will actually take control of your computer and start doing web browsing or filling in Excel spreadsheets, or even an API call. So then when it finds something appropriate, it will provide an observation to the LLM. So basically it's going to go out to do its tool, so call a weather API, and that's going to say, okay, found out from Open Weather API that the weather in Detroit tomorrow is going to be 30 degrees colder than today. So it's going to pass that observation back to the LLM. So then the LLM is going to pass the response to the user with the more up-to-date information. So that whole looping thing basically is the crux of what we're doing with our agents here. So let's look at the simplest hello world using the Agents SDK. So in this case, we're going to get it to write a haiku poem about programming. So the two parts that you want to look at here is that we have from agents import agent runner. So we have the agent, which in this case is it's a basic assistant. We're going to give it some instructions, which is you are helpful assistant. And then we run the agent and we ask it to write a haiku programming about recursion and programming, and we just print the output. So in order to get this to work, you need to do pip install OpenAI agents, which is different than what we've been doing before if you're using Python. And then you need to make sure that you got your OpenAI API key in your .environment file. So let me just go and start running some of this stuff. All of this code is up on, see what my stuff is. So under OpenAI agents, I just put this together today. So I have whatever code you want to look at in here. This is where the hello world is. I had to change it slightly because it wasn't reading the environment variables. So you have the requirements, all the stuff that you need to install. Recommend just, doing a pip install, doing a virtual environment, and then doing pip install to get everything to work. It should work for you fine. If it doesn't work for you, same as always, just open an issue on the GitHub repo, and I'll make sure I get it fixed in the next day or two. Okay, so we're doing Python hello world.py, and then it just gives us this thing. One of the other things that it's worth looking at as well, if we go into the playground, got to make sure I can find it. So we got logs, which is going to tell us that obviously I've been really busy today doing all this stuff. So you can see what happened here, where it's actually taking what I just ran and giving you the logs of how it worked, and actually giving you what the assistant returned. There is also traces that tells you everything that does, which is really, really helpful if something goes wrong, because a lot of times you're not really which agent it's using, because you can always have, well, typically you have multiple agents in each of your programs. In this case, we just have one. So there's really not much going on here. But for example, if I showed you the one that I did earlier, it's telling me exactly where it's going, where it's handing off to a different agent, which is exceptionally useful when you're trying to debug what's going on. Plus, it gives you data about what's going on. So when you have half a dozen agents and you don't understand where you're not getting the right answer, this is where you come, because it's going to tell you why it didn't work. Let me see if I can find one that didn't work. Yep, so get flight didn't work. Here's what was passed in. And then I can go debug my Python code and make sure I can fix it properly. Okay. Jumping ahead. Okay, so at its most basic, an agent has to have two parts, which is the agents with the instructions. It also would have tools. It could have handoffs. It could have guardrails. So guardrails, think of guardrails as, back to my example about that guy going to London, and he wants to book a couple of tickets for the theater in Shaftesbury Avenue, but he doesn't want to spend more than $200. Well, guardrails would be in there to say, don't buy the ticket if it's more than $200. So that's the kind of thing. So guardrails can also be used because a lot of times when agents go through the looping process, they keep on going until they find an answer. So you can use guardrails to just shut it down if if it's just using too much money. So you don't want to get one of those Amazon moments where you open up your email and find out that you got a $5,000 bill because your agent went rogue, the same way as we used to find when our EC2s went rogue, or our load balancers started spinning up too many EC2s for us. Okay, and then I did show you where the logs were. So you can you have much better ability with the Agents SDK now to be able to see what's going on under the covers than we've been able to do with assistants and things before that. Right, so these are all the different components that you have in assembling your agents. So we have access to models. So that's the typical ones you would expect. So GPT for Omni, Omni 1, Omni 3 Mini, GPT 4.5, all the usual ones. You have, at the moment, 4 different types of tools. So we have function calling, which is great because now we can call APIs. We have web search, so we can, just like you would do a web search within ChatGPT, the GUI, the web interface, we can do web search. We can do file search and embeddings. So if you have some files, some PDFs, you can upload them to OpenAI Playground and tell it what the ID of the file is, which just turns into embeddings, and it can use that for extra information. So that's kind of like a retrieval augmented generation as part of your tool. And you can also do computer use, which is super cool, which is basically back to, I think Anthropic do this as well. Essentially what you're doing is you're getting OpenAI to move your computer, to move your mouse and your keyboard and your computer, so you can get it to do some browsing. If you're putting stuff into Excel spreadsheets, a lot of my time is wasted doing commissions things or taking data from here and putting it there for healthcare or whatever else. So a computer use can really help you speed that stuff up as well. So we have access to knowledge and memory, so vector stores, so that would be whatever files that you put up, they would be stored in a vector store as embeddings, and you can also do the same kind of file search that you would do in just OpenAI API calls. Audio and speech, I haven't really done much with this yet, but you can create agents that can talk and understand language. So back to what we were saying earlier, maybe there's a chance here to create a really cool IVR, which wouldn't keep you in a loop. Just happened to be the other day where I was stuck in a massive loop, couldn't get out of it. Thank you, AT&T. So hopefully we can get some intelligent agents which would stop that sort of lame IVR type behavior. And guardrails, so prevent irrelevant, harmful, or undesirable behavior. So that's not just moderation. So we can connect to the moderation API and make sure that people are not using bad language. But we really, for me, what I'm mostly want to do is I want to make sure anything that's associated with money has a guardrail. So a guardrail would be for, I don't want you to spend more than $500 or $300 to fly from Detroit to New York, to LaGuardia. Orchestration, so there's all about how do we put all this stuff together. So how do we take our multiple agents and deploy them correctly, and then tracing is cool there too as well, because you'll be able to see what's going on, and then voice agents, I haven't covered that either. Okay, so let's look at something a little bit more complicated than our hello world. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce multiple agents, because we're going to have a math and a history tutor. We're going to have guardrails. The guardrail in this case is to just check to see that the person is actually asking a question about their homework. And then output types. So we can give it a much more of a structured output type to make sure that it always comes back with the same type of response, whether we're using the math or the history tutor. And we're also going to talk a little bit about handoffs, because we need to be able to ask the agent a question, and the question, if it's about math, it should go to the math tutor, and if it's about history, it should go to the history tutor. So the only way that we can do that is to hand it off. So how do we do that? So we have a triage agent. So so the user asks a question, and then the triage agent receives the question, and first of all determines if it's a homework question, and then chooses whether to send it to a math or history tutor based on whatever the question is. So how does it know if it's a homework question? Well, it has a guardrail check, and the guardrail check is an agent that evaluates whether the question qualifies as homework or not. So prevents, irrelevant questions from proceeding to the tutor agents, and maybe spending too much money. And then the math tutor and the history tutor are just agents that handle the math and history questions. Let's have a look at the code real quick. So here's the code. So as you can see here, we have our structured output. So I have a class which is basically defining homework output, and just, you know, a bool and reasoning for whatever the string is to say whether it was homework or not. This is our guardrail agent, which is check if the user is asking about homework, and then we have this output type that's associated with it. And then we have just our two math agents, our two tutor agents. We have the math agent and the math tutor and the history tutor, and we just basically tell them, you know, small instructions on how we want you to behave. Okay, let me have a look at the rest of the code. Okay, let's see if we can make this a bit bigger. Right down at the bottom here, this is where everything starts. So we are saying, we have two questions. The first one was, who is the first president of the United States? So that's obviously a history question. And then the second question is, what is life, which is irrelevant. So we're going to get a guardrail to stop that. So we have our triage agent. So our triage agent is basically the thing that bounces it to the appropriate tutor. So you determine which agent to use based on the user's homework question. The LLM is smart enough to be able to figure that out. And then the handoffs are history tutor agent or math tutor agent. And then we have this guardrail. So the guardrail function is defined as homework guardrail, which is basically in here. And then that calls the guardrail agent and checks to see if the user is asking about homework. So we have a couple of things in here. We have context. So that's the context about what's going on. The context of the agent. We have the agent itself, and we have whatever input data is going in. And if it doesn't work, it's basically going to trip this error condition, which says it was not homework. So let's run that real quick. So I'm just going to run it first. I will say that when I was playing around with these over the last few days, they don't always work, which is kind of annoying. But I think it's just happened again, hasn't it? Let me try it. So I am asking who was the president of the United States. So hopefully second time it'll work. So yeah, okay, first president of the United States was George Washington. That's great. And then let's see if we can get it to trip. So I have seen, one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this in the first place was because a lot of the press releases that were coming out were saying that this is production ready. I still think it's got an iteration to go before it's production ready, or else you just want to make sure that you don't do a one and done. You want to try it a few times in case it's not working. Okay, so that relatively worked. We did get the tutor getting asked the right question, and we did get what is life. So let me see if I can go back to, maybe this is a good time to use the traces. After all, that's what it's for. So this case, what happened was we got a guardrail check, and we got that it's false, so that's correct. What is life is a philosophical inquiry rather than a typical homework assignment. It's pretty hard to see that in there. And then the one that worked, so everything worked correctly, got the handoff to the history tutor as we would expect. And let's see what happened here. Okay, so it's hard to see this, but basically what's saying, the reason that it failed is the question is factual and related to historical information. It does not explicitly indicate it's for homework. But it could be. So basically what's happened is I don't think I defined my guardrail correct. It kind of got a bit confused that it was actually a homework question or not. So I just have to write better instructions, and then we'd probably be okay. So user error, put that one down to it. Okay, so we showed the traces. Okay, gotta say that's helped me an awful lot over the last few days. All right, so tools. Tools enable agents to interact with the world. So we know about guardrails now, we know about handoffs, we know about multiple agents. So now we want to talk to the outside world, because OpenAI is great, LLMs are great, but they're trained on outdated information. I want to use an agent to be able to do the cool things like my travel agent. And the only way that I'm going to be able to do that is to be able to call some external source. So OpenAI supports function calling. So once we're able to call a function, that means that we can call an API within that function. It's able to do web search, similar to what we did before for the, if you're just searching in ChatGPT, and I'll show an example of that later. And then file search, back to uploading your files into the playground, and then accessing that as a retrieval augmented generation, and then computer use that we talked about before. So let's create a function to call the Open Weather API to get the weather in Spanish and English. So in our example, the user asks what the weather is like in Detroit, because that's where I am today. And if the question is in Spanish, the Spanish agent calls the Open Weather API function and it responds in Spanish. And if the question is in English, it responds in English. I did see quite a few examples of function calling, but what kind of annoyed me, which is one of the reasons why I did this, was they weren't actually calling a real API. They were just saying insert API here. So I thought it would be just easier to just call an API as part of a function, so it can be out there if anybody wants to use it. Okay, starting at the bottom. So we have our main function again. I have two questions that I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask what's the weather like in Detroit in Spanish, and then what is the weather like in Detroit in English. So we have 4 agents. We have a weather agent, which is you can only provide weather information. The tool that it's using is getWeather, which is an API that I'll talk about in a second, a function that has an API call. We have a Spanish agent, we have an English agent, and then we have our triage agent. And the triage agent is going to have the handoffs to the Spanish agent or English agent. So it's going to decide based on whatever came in here, which to send it to. So we get which agent to send it to in order for us to be able to get the answer in our preferred language. And then getWeather, so openweathermap.org is kind of one of those many APIs that are out there. It's free for, I don't know, 1,000 calls or something. I did use SERP API as well. A few other things if you want to access Google searches, that's pretty cool. But in this case, all that I'm doing is I have my weather API key from OpenWeather weather map. So you just sign up for your API key, and it's pretty straightforward. And then I just messed it up again. Okay, hold on a second, go back to where I was. So that's where you get your weather key, put it in your environment. The URL to call it is, we're going to pass it in a city, which I'm passing in from my call. It's smart enough to be able to know, to be able to pull out the city Detroit, put it into my call for my function, which gets passed in to the triage agent, to the Spanish or English agent, and passed to my function tool. Calls this API, which in this case is passing in the city Detroit API key, the one that I just got on the website, and then you can decide whether you want it in metric or imperial. We get back, I have still quite a bit of debugging stuff in here. So the response comes back from my URL request, and then what I do is I just pull out the name, the temperature, conditions, and the humidity. Let's run that real quick, and hopefully that'll work. So here is my weather. The only difference between what is up online on GitHub and what's here is that I added some extra loading of my .env file so that it works correctly. You might be able to get away with that depending on how you run it. Okay, so weather. Okay, so yep, tells us that it's 22 degrees centigrade, 71.65 Fahrenheit, and humidity of 37%. Just to show I'm not cheating. So what am I doing here that's different than the homework tutor? So the things that are same is that we've got the handoffs, we have the triage agents. The thing that's different is that we actually have a function call which allows us to go to the outside world. So this is great. So now we can we can access more up-to-date information. And you can, so long as you have access to an API, you can basically do anything you want with this. And then if we go back to traces, you can see same thing here where we have the handoff is the Spanish agent. The Spanish agent called the get weather function. We have a green here, which means that it worked. We got all our timings over here as well. So if you need to debug why things are taking too long, you know what's going on, you know where to look. Okay, so then finally, the last thing I want to look is our travel agent. So this is me trying to replicate our friend going to London. But the original motivation comes from the OpenAI Dev Days. There was a demo there showing the an agent connected to the Wanderlust API to be able to speed up the type of thing that you do manually, going out to Kayak and finding all the stuff that's going on, hitting loads of different websites. So basically what I want to do is I just want to be able to run an agent. I'm thinking that this would be the perfect thing, coming up to the start of summer where before the kids get out of school, there's some great deals. So, we could see what flights are to different places, maybe get some cheap hotels before they go through the roof during the summer, that kind of stuff. Or if we're lucky, we might be able to find some really good deals over the summer. So I want to be able to, have a complete travel arrangement. So I'm thinking like old school travel agent, the whole computer says no, if you remember that Little Britain sketch. So you're walking into the travel agent and you're going to be able to figure out where you're going to go, and it's going to take care of the flights for you, it's going to take care of the accommodation for you, and it's going to take care of any car rentals that you need to do. Plus, it's also going to give you an itinerary. So gotta admit, I'm not 100% finished on this yet, because the thing I really wanted to do is to book things. So what I'll probably do is connect this to some MCP servers that we'll do in next month's meetup, and then we'll add some booking there. So future improvements, basically, to book something using the travel agent and then adding some guardrails so we don't overpay for anything. So let's have a look at this real quick. So here is my travel. So a couple of things happened. And one of the reasons why I really love ChatGPT and all the LLMs lately is the amount of information that it's giving me. So one of the things that I asked it to do was I asked it to be able to, I don't know if I can find it, but I asked ChatGPT, hey, I want to create this travel agent. I want to create this travel agent program, and I need to be able to get access to all this information. Can you tell me what APIs are out there that I can look at? It came back with Amadeus and a few other ones. I started using Amadeus, and for the main reason that it has a test database, which means it's great because I'm not going to put anything in production yet. There's a few other APIs out there that basically give you a whole bunch of free calls, but I wanted to, just do the basic thing where set up the API keys, work in a sandbox, and then figure out what I need to figure out before I actually put it into production. So Amadeus is the one that I'm using. It's fine for what I'm trying to do at the moment, but I need to move to production to be able to actually book anything. So I haven't done that yet. Okay, so let's see, what are the different parts of what we have here? So we have a number of triage agents again. Actually, I need to change something. I just realized I did something wrong there. Okay, so let's go to our travel. So we have our triage agent, which is going to hand off to the airline agent or the hotel agent. And I need to do this. You can tell I just did this over the last day or so. Nothing wrong with some vibe coding. Okay, so hopefully this will work and I don't mess everything up now. So I have a triage agent, which is basically going to hand off to the appropriate agent based on whether they want flight information or hotel booking information or the itinerary. I have an itinerary agent, which is going to use the web search tool, so it's a bit different from the other ones. So that's basically going to go out and use just the standard ChatGPT web search tool, which if you haven't seen it, that's just the little button at the bottom of ChatGPT that says, instead of just asking the LLM, we want to search the web too as well. We want to have some new functions. So the first one is going to be the get flight. We're going to have a get hotel for the hotel agent. So I want your helpful hotel booking assistant only. You know nothing about flight information. Your helpful flight assistant. You know nothing about booking hotels. We have our overall travel agent, which basically tells it what tools we're going to use in this case. And then what I did was I went back to the to our Amadeus, and I just went through all the different examples that they have out here, and basically just copied the Python code and put it into something that would be useful for this is hotel offers. That's not what I'm looking for. Go for flights. We have city search, flight availability search. So basically what you're doing is you're just taking whatever the Python example here is and then just putting it into something that you can use for within your agent. But it's a pretty robust API. There are a lot of things that you can do with it. And also there are tons of examples in Postman and lots of other things. They have tons of examples on GitHub, as you can see here, for lots of different things that you want to do. But one of the things that I wanted to point out, which I think is important as part of our travel agent. So although here I have a couple of things. I have get flight. So I'm calling Amadeus to say, give me the flight offers. And here I'm also calling Amadeus to say, give me the hotels that are available for whatever city it is. There is no reason why you can't use multiple APIs for whatever it is that you're trying to do here. So if you have a flight API that you think is really cool, and you have a hotel API that comes from something else, there is no reason why you can't use the two in conjunction with your agent. You don't have to keep on using the same thing over and over again. Okay, so hopefully I didn't completely screw this up. I had a couple of little helper things. So I'm asking, because there's a big conference on next month in Houston, and I want to know what the flights are to Houston. I want to create an itinerary in Houston, book hotels, all that sort of stuff. So I want to be able to speak English when I'm talking to my agent. I don't want to be necessarily talking this way. So I want to be able to say, give me the flight information from Detroit to Houston. So let's go back to this. I have a feeling I'll re-screw this up. Okay. And if it does mess up, we can always go and figure out what's going on the tracing. So it found a flight from DTW, Detroit, to Houston, George Bush International. It's using Spirit Airlines, which I don't think I'd ever fly, but it does tell me what the departure date is, how many hours altogether. So it looks like I have a stopover somewhere and what the cost is. Let's see if I can change this back to Detroit to Houston and see if it's smart enough to know. Next thing I want to do is I want to ask the agent, where can I stay in Paris? So it's going to be able to figure out using the other agent, the hotel agent, instead of the airline agent, to be able to figure out what I want it to do. The test database isn't great for the hotels, so it's only limited to very few cities. And also, what I'm doing each time is I need to be a bit smarter than this. I need to be running through all of the different flights to find what the cheapest one is. I need to be able to put differences in there. So the same as you would do in Kayak, where if you don't want to fly Spirit or Southwest, that you can tell it to just to filter out those options. I'm really just pulling back the first one for each of these things. I'm just getting the first flight result. So obviously there's better ways of doing this.
Hey, Godfrey, we have a question.
Sure.
So Carla wants to know, when you're testing the API, can you ask to filter out specific criteria?
Yes, you can. So the data that it brings back is huge. So that's one of the reasons why I like the Amadeus. It is it gives you all the information about what it gives you the information that you get if you're a desk clerk. So you get the information about what the booking, whatever the arcane language is for the booking class that you're in, gives you all that. It gives you the baggage policy. It gives you the how long it's going to take for the different segments of the flight. It basically gives you all the information, whether you can have a check bag, whether you can not have a check bag, gives you all the information that you possibly could get from the Amadeus. And the airline one seems to be by far the best API. So what I would probably do moving forward would be use Amadeus for the airlines and use something else for the hotels. Okay, I was going to do one last one. So the last one I wanted to do was to just use the web search tool. So this is, the type of thing that you really don't need an agent to do. I'm just asking for give me an itinerary for a weekend trip in Dublin, which is my hometown, because it's pretty easy for me to check up on what it's doing and what it's not doing. Okay, so where are we going? So I'm doing the weekend. So basically we're going to go to Trinity College, Book of Kells. Breakfast at the Queen of Tarts, that must be new, haven't been there, so that's something I'm going to go to Temple Bar. All the different things that you would expect to do when you're in Dublin. I did want to see if I can find this. No, I cannot find it. I will post it later. So Carla, to answer your question, what I'll do is I will post the results that you get back from the API in the GitHub repo, and you can take a look at it yourself later on to see all of the great stuff that it gives you. Okay. So what else do we have? So finally, what I wanted to talk about was just some of the resources that I came across when I was doing this. I did borrow some of the ideas. I don't think I used anybody's example, but I did want to make sure that I put some of the examples that I found really useful up here too as well. So let me go through those real quick. So that's the open weather map. We talked about that. We talked about traces. This one, building AI agents with OpenAI Agents SDK, step-by-step guide. That's got some really good information that I think would be useful if you're starting from scratch. This is the OpenAI Agents SDK. So it's all the way from intro. A couple of quick examples. What's the quick start? I think that's the one that I borrowed. The history tutor and the math tutor, all the different parts of, there's MCP, which we'll be doing next month, all different tools. So the web search tool, the file search tool, and how to use each of the different ones, which I think is really cool. I started off with this one, getting started with OpenAI Agents SDK. So they had a simple agent, which getting the weather forecast, finding places of interest, and then talking about the guardrails. So that's something that you might want to talk about too as well. This is, or look at as well, this is the OpenAI Academy. So it goes from introduction to ChatGPT to anything a bit more complicated. AI for nonprofits, automate knowledge graphs for RAG. So there's lots of stuff in here that definitely worth looking at. Live events and other stuff. We talked about the tool agents. This is the OpenAI's huge list of different examples. So we didn't even go about the different agent patterns. So it's handoffs, model providers, research bots, some examples for customer service and financial research agent, which I think is using deep search. These are the different examples that I just did this evening, which is on my repo, OpenAI Agents. And if you go into look at the repos, it's got all the repos for all the previous talks that we've done too as well, if you want to look at those. I did pull this one up, give me some Python code that uses new OpenAI Agents SDK with a function that calls an external API. So I just stole the code from this here. So one of the things that I was trying to explain to somebody earlier is my development days are long gone. I have developers who work with me who are way better than I am. But basically what I end up doing is using ChatGPT to be able to do the straw man for whatever it is that we're trying to do. So don't be intimidated by not knowing how to do functions, because this essentially is all you need to get it to work. I just asked it the question, what do I need to do a function? I would say it gets some stuff wrong, because this is wrong. It's pip install OpenAI agents. So you can't trust the black box. You got to make sure that you're conscious all the time and aware of what's going on, because stuff will go wrong. So double check, trust but verify. These are all the Amadeus examples for all the different, like I said, the flights are probably the best things that are on there. They have some offers in there, which I thought was pretty cool. They have some weird things where tell me what was the favorite place for people to leave from an airport in May of last year. So you could find out where everybody was going May of last year. I don't know how useful that is, but they do have some kind of weird and wonderful stuff in there. And then Amadeus so it's developers.amadeus.com, sign up to your API key, and then you should be cool. Okay, and with that, I'm going to say next month we are going to do the MCP stuff. So what I'll probably do is continue on in a similar vein to what we were doing today, but instead of us talking to an API directly, what basically we'll be doing is talking to an MCP, which will then be talking to an API. And I have found some great MCP servers for Airbnb, so I'm thinking that's a good place to start for the booking. And then I have to see if I can find one for hotels, or maybe create our own. That's it. If anybody's got any questions, just put them in the chat. And I think we answered everything, didn't we, Mike? Okay. All right. Any other questions? You can go off mute if you want to ask a question too as well. That's fine. Nope. Okay. Well, thanks very much for coming. And
I have a question.
Oh, Paul,
I have a question.
shoot.
Do you go to any other meetups in Detroit? I live around Detroit too.
Yeah, there's starting to appear again. So I go to the .NET one, which is in Epitech that Dustin runs. I have gone to the one that Mike Onslow runs. I usually go to that one, but they're either up on Eventbrite or meetup.com. So that's usually the one. So you got any other examples, Paul, that are cool that we should go to?
I like the ones in Ann Arbor, like the entrepreneurship ones. And
and Spark and stuff like that. Yeah, I used to go to those all the time.
Yeah. And they have demonstrations. I always meet cool people.
Yeah, shoot me an email if there's anything interesting come up.
All right, great.
Now that we're done with COVID, we should be all meet in person, but it's hard to do it when we're all over the world with this thing, especially.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Other questions? If not, I just want to remind people to find us on YouTube at Re Software, and you could also find us on LinkedIn. And I'm going to finish off with a slide that has our newsletter. If you want to subscribe to that, you'll get notifications of our articles and other meetups.
Yep, and the video would be live on YouTube if you want to see this again. The slides will go up tomorrow. I'll post them on the meetup group, and then the slides and the video go up there, and then in a week or two we'll have the blog. So this turns into a blog, which will be on Reese.com.
Yep, and you can go on our website and see all of the old blogs, so you can kind of follow along with the video and a written tutorial, depending on what your medium of preference is.
All right.
All right.
Thanks very much. See you guys.